you got a $2 million buyer who reached out to you and said, I don't know how you worked your way into my algorithm. You don't post a ton about real estate.
None of this is original content. Just go look at what people are doing in other markets and recreate that video for your market.
You just started in real estate 2 years ago. Your Instagram blew up from 600 followers to 60,000 in 1 year.
When you're experimenting with different types of content, you lean into the ones that perform really well. It was doing that for consistently for 7-8 months that allowed me to really expand on the content that we started. I actually threw together a bucket of content that we do. I would say the buckets is the front runner. Actually, one of my best performing videos ever is that has over 1 million views, and it netted me over 4,000 new followers to my Instagram page.
From someone who nearly dropped out of high school to someone who the mayor coined as the hype man of Kansas City, how do you get the mayor, someone of that caliber, to give you a title like that?
Well,
You've just started in real estate practically 2 years ago, and your Instagram blew up from 600 followers to 60,000 in 1 year. So from someone who nearly dropped out of high school to someone who the mayor coined as like the hype man of Kansas City, how do you get like the mayor, someone of that like caliber, to give you a title like that?
Well, I just printed out a official hype man of Kansas City on like a certificate that I made in Canva and brought it with me to my interview with the mayor. And at the end of our interview, I was like, hey, by the way, would you sign this? And we had like all our cameras set up and everything. And so it was like the perfect photo op. And what was he going to do? Say no. But I think more to that is like, the clout that I gained from my social media presence got me in the room to begin with. Right.
Yeah.
So like the mayor didn't know who I was a year ago. And then I started doing this social thing. And then all of a sudden, I dubbed myself the unofficial hype man of Kansas City. So it's kind of like, a last minute idea that I had is like, ooh, maybe he'll be, cool enough to like make me the official hype man of Kansas City, because I'm unofficially that, but it was a fun deal.
Nice. And just really quick, like, can you kind of give like rough numbers for like this year, what you're looking at in results from like Instagram and YouTube, and then what you have teed up for next year? Because we talked a little bit about that off camera first.
Yeah. So my first year in real estate, I was working 2 jobs. I've always been in sales. I was a 1099 sales contractor prior to getting into real estate. And I did that pretty much all of like 2023 up until September. And then like October, November of last year, I went full time into real estate. So last year was my first full year. I did 7 transactions, but I didn't sell a house until like June. And then this year we're going to end up with 41 closed transactions. About 25 of those have come from YouTube and 10 from Instagram, and then kind of a few stragglers like Sphere. And actually I had one repeat client this year, which was kind of nice.
Nice. And yeah, and you mentioned you have like 20 plus already lined up for next year, and so you're on pace to potentially double. So it's a very kind of like upward trajectory for you, and a lot of that has come off the back of everything that you've really built on social. So I was curious, why did you even get started in social versus like you could have done open houses, you could have cold called? Like, what attracted you to like Instagram and YouTube?
Well, yeah, like I said, I've been in sales kind of my whole career. And I owned a roofing company in Denver. Before that, I knocked doors. Before that, I worked for a call center and I cold called. And I just have done enough of that in my sales career that I came into real estate. I was like, this is what I'm not going to do. And so then it became like, okay, how can I kind of build this attraction-based marketing plan, because when I really honed my skills in my roofing business, I went from knocking doors to soliciting insurance agents. And when I kind of unlocked that, secret sauce of like, man, this really beats knocking doors and having people slam them in my face, to all of a sudden I'm getting phone calls from people like, hey, such and such over at State Farm referred you. And it's like a way warmer lead. I got into this business and I was like, okay, how can I kind of recreate that in a way? And so I started just doing some research, and I stumbled across a few creators, Ken Pozek, who's kind of become like a mentor to me. And I was like, I've never made content before, but there's not really anybody doing it well in Kansas City. At the time, there were like 2 YouTube channels and nobody doing anything even closely related to what I do on Instagram. And I was like, I'm going to give this a shot, because, at the beginning of 2023, there was like this huge push for agents to do more video marketing. And so like Broke Agent Media podcast, and I was listening to all those and just like absorbing all of that. And they were like interviewing Brad McCullum and all of these guys that were like crushing it on video. And so I just decided to like take a leap of faith and see if I could be successful in it.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard of like Cutco, like the knife company.
Yeah.
Um, so I did that since I was like 17, 18.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and did that for 5 years. And I had that same point where I was like, I was making like, I didn't have to door knock, but I would make like 200 phone calls. And it was like, what can I do to like not do this and still get sales? And it's kind of the same thing. That's how I land into content. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of like that same idea where it's like you're trying to figure out what can I do to like not have to go through that grueling pain of the old school of way of sales.
Yeah, man. I mean, and here's the thing: is it's a long play. Like, if you want immediate success in real estate, you can't just start doing content and expect to get business right away. The reality is I put out my first YouTube video in January of 2023, and I didn't close my first transaction from YouTube until September. So most people can't afford to wait 9 months to start actually closing business. And if I wanted to, have some immediate results, I could have done expired listings. I did a couple open houses. Honestly, like I just hated them. Like they were so emotionally draining for me, like having to like be on, for like 2 hours, and like, just that amount of socialization, honestly, which is funny for somebody in this industry, but it's like it just wears me out. So I was like, well, this isn't going to work, and so yeah, I saw these other agents that were having huge success in other markets, and so like it wasn't it wasn't like an if this works, it was okay, this is going to work. If I give it enough time and I stay consistent with it, I'll start getting business. And then after I closed that first transaction in September, it was like snowball. So like I closed one in June. My first deal was just a friend of mine. And then that first transaction in September, and then I closed, 5 more deals by the end of the year. And then we just kind of came into 2024, and it's just been gangbusters all year.
Nice. That's awesome. And I saw this ties into a little bit of what you do, but you got a $2 million buyer who reached out to you and said, I don't know how you worked your way into my algorithm. Uh, which platform was that on?
Instagram.
Instagram.
Yeah.
So talking about that, like the stuff that you post, if I look at it from like probably the lens of like a typical realtor, uh, who might not necessarily know Instagram and kind of like the playbook and everything to grow, that's gotten you 70,000 followers. I look at it and I see you don't post a ton about real estate.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
can you talk through the strategy around that and how that actually lands you deals?
Well, it was kind of trial and error, honestly. because I started out doing a lot of real estate related content. And I enjoy doing that. But honestly, like, I think that, if I'm wanting to grow the business that I want to grow, which is, a big team that's doing, a lot of transactions, and then, me kind of moving into more of just like a rainmaker role, then we have to appeal to a broader audience, right? And the reality is like a very small percentage of our community are actively buying and selling. But that does not mean that at some point down the road, they won't become an active buyer and seller. And in fact, we've been doing these giveaways the last couple of months. And what we're finding is that there are a good chunk of people who are considering in the next 6 to 9 months of actually becoming a buyer or seller.
Hmm.
And so we've added those people to our database. Um, so, when what I would say to somebody who, looks at my page and says, well, you don't really talk a lot about real estate, that's very intentional. I always tell people I do enough real estate content on my page to remind people that I'm a realtor. And it's kind of like I don't do any advertising or brand. We've done a couple like co-branded deals with like that just made sense for our page, but the advertising on my Instagram is for my real estate business, right? And so my followers kind of are already teed up to know that, hey, every once in a while we're going to see like a home tour or a listing video of Kyle's, but we also like do a really good job and make sure that those are executed really well to where people still enjoy that content.
Nice. And yeah, it reminds me of a quote. Like, I had Juan Alcala on, YouTuber in Tampa. He said this, I think it came from Russell Brunson, where it's like kind of like the bad marketers focus on the bottom of the funnel, and over stress about that, whereas the great marketers really focus on the top of the funnel, which you have nailed. And I want to get into that in a second, but you said something about a giveaway, and Brandon actually said he was running one today,
Yeah.
and he showed like,
We'll give it away a vacuum.
yeah. So I saw the mechanics around it. Do you kind of do the same thing, like mechanically, like you have the form, like a Google form and everything, and that's how you get the information? And like one of the questions on there, like some of the questions are like buying or selling. Is that kind of the same mechanically?
Yeah. So I think it was Laura Jalot was on the MREA podcast, and my market center sent me that podcast episode in November or October, and he was like, "Hey, if you want to double your business next year, do this." And you know that I'm that's kind of like my one of my strengths is like I'm not trying to recreate the wheel here. I have been trying to figure out a way to um you know to transfer some of my followers into our database because I have 70,000 followers on Instagram, but it's like we're not dripping on them in email. I'm dripping on them just through social media, but we want to bring them into our database. And so I listened to that podcast and I just took that play out of her playbook and I started running it to the T. And yeah, what I think one of the things that is different about the way that I did it, and then probably what Brandon's doing is she did the Google form, but a lot of her giveaways are on Facebook. And so, we have a Facebook, but it's not nearly as active as Instagram. And so, yeah, just created this Google form. In that form, it has about 6 questions. Obviously we get all their information, their contact information, but then we ask specific, very pointed questions about, are you considering buying a house in 2025? And we give them the option to say no. But all the questions are required to be entered into the giveaway. You have to answer the question, but you can answer no to all of them. And then, from there, if anybody raised their hand and said, hey, I have a house that I need a CMA on, or I might be looking to sell, or I have a referral for you, they go into our database. And then I'm interviewing an ISA today because we've gotten over 400 leads from the 5 giveaways that we've done over the past 2 months. And my 2 agents on my team can't call through all of them. So, which is a good problem to have, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's been a really cool way to convert my followers into potential clients.
What giveaways have you found that worked for you?
So I'm not only the official hype man of Kansas City, I'm also the honorary mayor of Waldo, which is the neighborhood that I live in, and they kind of do this like fun, at their fall festival. There's an honorary mayor position, and I ran for it this year. And so one of the first duties or things that I did as mayor is I went around to Waldo businesses in the month of November, and we did a giveaway each week to a specific Waldo business. And then we dropped those videos on Monday. So I went out, filmed 4 reels with my videographer. We had them all queued up, and then we just put like a mini chat bot behind it. And so they would drop the trigger word in the comments. We would send them over the form. They fill out the form. You're entered in the giveaway. So those all went, pretty good. I think we got around 125 leads from just those 4 giveaways. But
Nice.
then we're giving away 2 Chiefs tickets, which actually I'm announcing the winner today. And that giveaway alone has netted us like over 300 leads, and we've had a ton of people. Obviously, it's the Chiefs. They're
Yeah.
good tickets to the last Chiefs game of the year, so it got really good traction.
That's awesome. And yeah, that kind of ties into like the play that you started moving into, like the newsletter and the email, which we can get into a little bit later. But I think the most important thing when I kind of look at all the stuff that you're doing is kind of back to that like top of funnel. Like if you didn't have 60,000, 70,000 followers, that giveaway wouldn't necessarily perform as well. And it's because you've just been like the Gary V jab, jab, jab. Like you've built that audience over time, and that's really helped the giveaways do a lot better now too. Which it's not a problem, and I'm not saying that it's like don't do a giveaway at like 1,000 followers or anything, but I wanted to kind of dive into like some of the content that you do that like performs. Like when I look at some of the buckets of content, you can tell me if this is wrong, how you think through it, like with your team and set up like the systems for it. Like I see kind of like development news and updates, some like the like sports culture, like integration with like the Chiefs and everything. This week in KC, some of like lifestyle content, POV, and then there's some like market real estate tours. Like, how do you think through? Like, do you have like here's a list of the 5 to 10 things that we kind of post about, and then this is how we kind of spread it out? Like, how do you think through your Instagram?
Yeah, I actually threw together a uh, a bucket of content that we do. Let me pull it up. It's in Notion. So yeah, I mean, I'll start off by saying like I grew my audience with development. So when I was getting this like crazy growth out the gate, we were pretty much exclusively posting reels about new developments that were coming to Kansas City, and that was like I did one that did really well, and I was like, oh wow, my audience is really engaging with this. Let's just do more of that. And I think that's a really important thing for people to understand is like when you're experimenting with different types of content, you you lean into the ones that perform really well. And so it was doing that for consistently for like, 7, 8 months that allowed me to really expand on the content that we started now that we produce on a regular basis. So, I would say the buckets are Development news is the front runner. Sports team news, we don't do like, like score updates and stuff like that. It's more like there was a big vote that happened in April about the future of the Chiefs and Royals stadiums, and I did
Mm.
a lot of coverage on that. So that kind of falls into the development bucket almost, but and then like something else about the Chiefs is like they're one of the highest valued brands in the NFL now, like top three. So I did like a post on that because it's not like it's Kansas City related and everybody loves the Chiefs, but it's not like, hey, the Chiefs won today sort of
Yeah.
thing. So it's more of like a news related post. Real estate tours and market stats, that consists of some of ours. Hyper local memes. So memes are like, one of my favorite things to do because they're super easy to make, and they usually those can go viral. But I do them like in a hyper local way. So they go viral, but like they're still only really bringing followers to my page that are interested in Kansas City content. Actually, one of my best performing videos ever is a meme that has over 1 million views, and it netted me over 4,000 new followers to my Instagram page. And then weekend event. So like every Friday we do a post consistently that's like these are the top 6 things that are happening this weekend in Kansas City, and those don't get like the most views, but people consistently come to my page every Friday for that post. And so
Yeah.
like those are the super fan. Like I even have other real estate agents that I talk to, and they're like, man, I love your page because like anytime I don't know what's going on and on the weekend, I just go to your page and consistently every Friday you're dropping that post. And then one of the things that I think is another hack that people don't talk about enough is I have found some really cool creative people in my market that, because of my following now, they collab with me on a regular basis. And so it's like free content about Kansas City that I know is going to do well and perform well with my audience, that all I have to do is accept a collab. And in fact, there's a guy that I do a lot of drone work with, and he makes these really cool, like, speed ramp drone videos with music and everything. And then he'll send me the video. I post it and then just collab with him. And the benefit to him is he gets more followers to his page. So that's kind of a fun little hack. And I actually was doing talk about the giveaways. And I think that's a easy way for you to collab with a local business. Like just go in there and be like, hey, I want to buy $100 gift card and give it away. Can I collab with your account? And some of these, restaurants and businesses have like 10, 20,000 followers. So you can kind of hijack their audience in that way.
Yeah.
And then the other one that we do consistently is every single month we do just a market update on the median sales price. And so I really like those pieces that are consistent, like the Friday posts and the monthly real estate posts, because it's like I don't have to think about it. It's just like this is content that I know I'm going to post on that day. And if I have nothing else to post, I at least have that.
It's crazy to think about the concept that you're building, that like Ken's building. It's it's the new form of media instead of like all of these other forms of media that are very negative news based, very political. And it's like you guys are building this positive form of media that people are like, man, I actually want to see this content. And it's like and then you're just building a business off the back end of it.
Yeah, I mean it's cool because since we have revenue coming in from our real estate business, we're not so tied to, I have to report this kind of news, because we're banking on advertising dollars or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think that I run into people all the time. They're just like, I get all my news from you. And I think in a world where like doom scrolling and since COVID, and it's like people are so burnt out on like, Kansas City isn't the, safest city in America. In fact, we're like I think we fell off the top 10 most dangerous this year, but still, like, you know, you every single morning I wake up to my local news outlets that are reporting the latest shooting or whatever, and it's just so depressing. And me as a positive, like, optimistic person, that's just not like the kind of news that I want to report on. And there are plenty other media outlets that are reporting it, so it's like there we don't need another one of those, right? For me, I just kind of look at it like, what do I want to know? Like, I want to know what's coming to Kansas City. I want to know, like, what's the newest restaurant that's opening up. I want to know about the new developments. And, like, I always, on the weekends when I have, when I'm not working, if we have some free time, I'm like Googling what's going on this weekend in Kansas City. So I just look at it through the lens of, like, what am I looking for in content? And then I try and tailor that. And what I found is that a lot of people have similar interests.
Yeah. And I agree with you because I find myself doing that even in Tampa, just as a homeowner here. Yeah. I was curious on one thing, and this kind of ties into, uh, I want to ask you about it when we get to YouTube. The meme centric content.
Yeah.
Um, I'm like, for example, on YouTube, I have an opinion on some of the negative content. On It's like avoid this, like don't do this, like the negative side of that. And I know some people have this negative opinion about the meme stuff, and it's like, well, that's not really on brand. That brings in the wrong people, or like those aren't the type of people I work with. Like, what's your thought along those lines for like that type of content?
I like a good laugh, and, like, again, when it's hyper local, like, we in our market, we are split down the middle by state line. And so half of the, population lives in Kansas and the other half lives in Missouri. And, like, I did a meme once about, like, telling people from out of state, about where you live in Kansas City. And, like, so saying you live in Kansas City when you really live in Overland Park, and it's like they're the same, but they're different, but they're the same, So it's like that was a very relatable meme that did really well. People were like, "Oh my god, that's so true," And it's, so I think it, like, it just creates more, I don't know, like, clout. And, like, people, I'm making memes that I know that people have thought about before, that if you live here. And so it's just very relatable content to my audience. So I I mean, I think there is some validity to just making memes to try and go viral. I think it depends on what your goals are, right? Like, because and the reality is, I don't want to bring a bunch of people to my page from outside of my market, but I want to capture as much of my market as possible. And, kind of my goal, just because, like, I think about, like, numbers, and I'm like, if I could just have a fraction of the metro, right? Like, I'll be happy. And my number is 10%. If I could have 10% of the market in our metro, that's 200,000 followers. If I could have 200,000 followers in the Kansas City metro, and, not all of them will be here, but that's a huge market share, right? Like, and again, if we're talking about the top of the funnel, like, people are going to, like, I got my biggest listing ever from Instagram. It's a $1.7 million super contemporary, awesome house, and I worked my way into their algorithm, and they got to know me. And so once they reached out, they were just like, "Man, we really love the marketing that you do. Love what you're doing for Kansas City. We want to work with you." So it's like, yeah, I mean, the meme content, you could go a lot of different directions, but I think if you do it the right way, you'll attract the right people.
Yeah, agreed. And it it's just like one layer to kind of like the whole strategy, which diving into like what you said, your best performing content is kind of like that news approach, where it's like you're breaking the news. You're kind of being that source of local media, which is generally helps break it a lot quicker, especially on Instagram. But you've kind of talked about this. Can you share like a cool story or something that's kind of came off the back of you doing all this?
Oh, I mean, I think one of the coolest things that still like catches me off guard every time is when I'm just like, I'm out at First Fridays in the Crossroads and somebody's like, "Oh, you're the moving to KC guy," like as a real estate agent who's hasn't been licensed for, I've only been licensed for 2 years. Like that's so valuable, right? Like, we're always trying to be top of mind, right? And I'm top of mind with so many people in my market because I just deliver high value information on a regular basis and ask for nothing in return, right? Like I'm not asking for anybody to pay me. They just they get worked into my audience, and then they I build rapport just through delivering that value, right? We talk about that all the time in this industry, is like deliver value, deliver value. Well, I'm just giving that away for free on a daily basis and hoping that in return some people will choose to like use me for their real estate needs. But I think probably the coolest thing that has happened, outside of like I've been invited to like a numerous events and like free tickets to this. I just got free tickets to the Chiefs game last weekend, because some like sports betting or like fantasy football type website, they wanted me to do like just a story in my Instagram stories, so that was pretty cool. But like interviewing the mayor, like come on, that's a pretty cool thing, and that happened around the time when all of the stadium stuff was going on, and I was like the go-to news source for that. And the assistant for the mayor reached out to me on Instagram and was like, "Hey, the mayor would love to do an Instagram live with you sometime." And I was like, "Well, would he be interested in doing like a full-fledged interview for my YouTube channel?" And she was like, "Yeah." And so like that's awesome. Like, how else can you get in the same room? Like, I went to the 16th floor of City Hall and got to sit in the mayor's office with him for 30 minutes and just talk, about development and the future of Kansas City. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just having that opportunity like kind of speaks volume with what happened when you just build an audience and focus on building that audience and cultivating it rather than trying to just generate business and sales and everything from it constantly.
Yeah, I think nothing that we do comes across as salesy. It's like just try to genuinely provide value, and, like the type of content that we like to consume. And it's paying off in a big way.
Yeah. So now that you're getting busier, you started building a team, you're starting to get more like leverage. You're probably starting to put a lot more systems in place. I'm sure in the beginning, things were a little more like haphazardly, kind of like, okay, let's post this, let's do this. But now there's probably a lot more structure behind it. Can you kind of talk through your content process, maybe some of the systems that you've put in place that have helped you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, on Instagram, it's a little easier for us to plan out on YouTube, um, because of the type of content that I post on Instagram. So much of it is in real time, because we're like breaking news, and like I have a subscription to my local business journal here, and so it's like every morning that's what I do. I hop on, all these local media outlets, and then we are on like the mayor and the city of Kansas City's media list now, so we also get like those press releases at the same time. So that makes it a little challenging for like planning out content for Instagram. I try to stay at least like a week ahead of it if I can. So, we'll batch shoot, like, if they're we have like a working list of just all the developments that are happening in Kansas City, and we'll comb through that pretty regularly and look back and be like, oh, we haven't done one on this one in like 2 months. Let's see what we can dig up on it and maybe make a new piece of content about it. But beyond that, it is just like, putting the right people around you. Like I have a VA who's amazing. She does pretty much all of my like headline posts, which are just like those, still images with the big text on them. And so that's really nice because like during the day, if I'm out showing houses or I'm in meetings or something like that, and I get a news update, I can just shoot that over to my VA and like, hey, let's make a post about this. She'll put it all together and send it back to me and be like, how's this look? And I'll be like, oh, let's change the title, let's do this. So I think that's the more important thing if you're going to go with this approach, is just having the right leverage and the right people around you. And my VA is really good at like Canva, so she can do some really really cool things. So I think I got lucky there.
Nice. And I want to ask about the VA, but just really quick on the media list. Like, I mean, that's massive to be on the media list and get the press releases before everyone else. Did that just happen off the back of the interview, or did you have to ask for that? Or
Yeah, so I went to a an event for it was basically like a community event where they were looking for feedback on this specific development, and I went down there and started talking to so we have the Port KC, who they're kind of like a development arm here in Kansas City, and they provide a lot of incentives and funding and stuff like that. They had some representatives there, and I started this conversation with one of them, and she used to work for like a news, one of the local news sources here, and she was like, "Are you on our media list?" And I was like, "What's that?" And she was like, "Yeah, you should always ask to be put on these media lists." She's like, "I'll definitely add you to ours." And so then now I just ask, like if like when I went and interviewed the mayor, I was like, "Hey, can we be on your media list?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." So it's pretty easy actually. um, you know, I think you have to have like the credentials,
yeah,
like, and like they're not just going to give anybody access to that information, but if you can show like and have a track record of like, no, we're providing value and we're reporting the news, and like we're considered a news source here, it's pretty easy to gain access to those things.
yeah. It basically just ties back to like again, build the audience, and then it's way easier to make the ask after that. Um,
Absolutely.
so I know some people, like especially people who don't have a VA, never hired a VA. They'll be they just get so wrapped up in the details of it, and they start going, "Well, I don't know if I'm ready. Is it going to cost a lot full time? Like training them, managing them. Like, what have you kind of learned as far as like, and what expectations can like another agent expect? Like, you rough costs or training, or like just what should they expect going into it?"
Yeah, there are a couple of different. I mean, Cyberbacker is a big one. I actually have mine through Brevity, and I don't use Brevity CRM, but a buddy of mine recommended them, so that's where I went to find mine, and it was pretty cool. Like once I joined, they kind of asked me some questions and then lined up some candidates, and I think I interviewed like 7 people before I found mine. And once I interviewed her, I just knew. I was like, yeah, this is who I want. But I think as far as like the timing, you get to a point where it becomes unmanageable, right? Like, uh I was doing content for 9 months before I sold any real estate. And then I started doing a good amount of real estate and realized, man, if I want to stay consistent with Instagram and YouTube, like I need help. And so, it just got to a point where it was like I didn't have another choice. And I think that's a really good problem to have, right? To be in a situation where it's like I'm selling a lot of real estate now, but I have to keep feeding, my funnel if I want to keep this thing going. And I think that's where a lot of people uh, start to get tripped up, is like if you do this thing right, you can build a really well-oiled business. um but I see a lot of people who do YouTube and they don't build in leverage. They try to do everything themselves, and then they start falling behind on posting consistently, or their, the quality of their videos lags. For me, I'm like constantly trying to figure out how we can improve and how we can be the best in my market. Like, I want people to watch other YouTube videos in my market and then find my channel and be like, this guy's is well above the rest, right? And so, and now it's like, I have a weekly call every Monday with my VA. We kind of talk about, what her current tasks are, what she's doing. Right now it's a lot of data entry with these like giveaways and getting them into our system. But then, she's just available all the time. So if I like, again, have something that I need her to work on, I just shoot it over on WhatsApp. And now, I do have a part-time director of operations, because I think eventually where I'm heading is like, I can't effectively manage my VA because I have so much else going on. So it's like, I almost need somebody else to manage my VA to make sure that we're optimizing and getting, maximizing that, leverage that we have with her, because she does an amazing job. But if I don't stay on top of like getting her the tasks, she has nothing to do. So, I think having that middle ground too, because there is a layer of like, disconnect, because she's in the Philippines and I'm in Kansas City. So having that in between person that's like, that's on those calls every Monday, and then has the ability to just like hop on a call with her if she needs help with something, has also been pretty clutch.
Yeah, and that's huge. I know we kind of just gloss over it, but like just one, like the fact that you're so involved with like, hey, here's actually how to tweak the post. It's not like go figure it out. It's like, hey, here's the suggestions. Like you're training her, you're helping her, you're walking her through, and then you start to realize, okay, again, time is becoming a constraint. So it's not just like her fault and like her not figuring out. Let me figure out how to best kind of support her, and that's creating like another layer.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to transition a little bit into YouTube, because you've mentioned it's a massive lead generation for your business. Nearly 80% of your business comes from it. Um, did you start on Instagram first and go into YouTube, or
No, I actually started Instagram first, because when I got licensed, I told my broker at the time that I was going to do 30 posts in 30 days on Instagram to kind of like backlog some content so that I didn't look like a new agent. And then it was in that 30 days of doing these posts and trying to do it consistently that I discovered that I actually like really enjoyed it. I was like, huh, this is fun. And so then that sent me down the rabbit hole of like, okay, how can I make this a feasible thing to generate business? And that's when I discovered YouTube. And so I got licensed in November of 2022. I did that 30 days of content, and then I posted my first YouTube video in January of 2023. And the first video I did, I was in my laundry room. My washer and dryer were like right behind me. I didn't have like any kind of background or anything. I was just like, I felt urgency because I saw an opportunity, and I was like, more people are going to start doing this. Like, this is this is a good way to get business. And so I was just like, you know what, I'm going to go all in on this. And, and then I started actually obsessing over YouTube. And so I was doing 2 videos a week for like the first 2 months, just to kind of, again, backlog some content. And then I got really like into my analytics, and like, I'm a competitive person. So I was like, okay, how am I faring versus these other channels? How many views am I getting? Because to me, it's all a numbers game. And a lot of people will say like, with YouTube, it's not about going viral and getting a lot of views. But I'm like, if you can, again, keep it hyper local to where you're attracting the right audience, and you can maximize views within that audience of people, you're going to get more leads, right? Like, now again, I don't want to have a 200, quarter million views on a YouTube video that's getting all of these international views and people who aren't considering moving to Kansas City. Like, I want to keep it local enough to where it's only, valuable to people who are either moving to my market or live in my market. But at the end of the day, it's a numbers game, and it's like one of my biggest competitors, they're averaging like 200-300 views on their videos, and our last few have, this last one that we did has almost 20,000. So, and if I look at like a Ken Posick, that that's what he's doing consistently, and he's built a mega business out of it. So, again, kind of just taking a page out of somebody else's playbook. I'm like, that's the blueprint, right? Like, how can we have videos that hit every single time, that are highly engaging, that are converting leads? And that's the type of content that we want to make.
Yeah. And talking about the content you want to make, and what you found that have worked for you, because now you have over 7,000 subscribers. I find a lot of the time people kind of get wrapped up in the details. They're like, well, what about this equipment, this analytics, or this? And they start going down these different paths where it's like, well, first it's like the strategy, like what should you even create versus not. So, like, what have you found?
Yeah, I mean, I think we I know a lot of people do like the vlog style videos. For me, honestly, like, to your point, when I started doing this, I was like, I have to have a setup where I could just sit down and record. Because if I have to like set all this crap up, and like, every time I go out in the field to try and do a vlog or something, I have some kind of equipment failure. Like, I'm like, like, I didn't charge my gimbal, or, like my mic's acting up and won't connect. And it's just like, I have a setup that I put together that I could just come in here. I have a teleprompter, put my script in, I can record a video in 30 minutes, get that off to my editor. And it's like, where it's plug and play. I think as far as like the type of content, we're constantly, just kind of researching what is. I mean, none of this is original content. I think that's what a lot of people need to hear. That, like, just go look at what people are doing in other markets and recreate that video for your market. Like, I like to do videos that I think are interesting. Again, it's kind of similar to, my Instagram. I've done a lot of pros and cons videos. I've done some map tour videos. I hate those videos. They're so boring. But for me, it's like, who am I? What do I like to do? It's like, I like to put a positive spin on things. So even when we do the negative kind of like clickbaity titles of like, avoid Kansas City unless you can handle these whatever, 5 things, it is more positive. Like, it's like, yeah, these things are kind of, challenging, but like, the fact of the matter is that there are challenges with living anywhere, right? And if you can overcome these 5 things, then Kansas City is a pretty great place to live, right? And I think that's what it's like, that's what attracts people. And I see guys in my market that are like, they get so caught up in, like, they did one negative headline video and it took off, and it's like their best performing video, and then they just start doing all negative headline,
Yeah.
and it's like, that's the wrong direction to go, right? If you're looking, that is going to get you numbers, but it's going to get you the wrong audience.
Yeah, and that kind of dives into like if I had to like very high level kind of bucket like your YouTube content, and I'm sure you have kind of different ones. It's like you have some of that like moving to relocation type content, and one of the ones that perform the best is just like it's more like a warning or cautionary tale of like there's a little negative spin, but then you kind of respin it within the content to positive. That's like one. Then the second is like the development, the future growth, the same stuff you do on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other is kind of like neighborhood guides. And there's resale, there's new construction, home tours, all kind of fall a little under that. So is that kind of like how you think about it in a way, or?
I wish I could say I'm that organized. The development piece is like, I've really wrestled with that as to whether or not that makes sense for my channel.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, the answer that I came up with is yes, because it's like, it appeals to a lot of people who live here, yes. But if I'm moving to a market, I also want to know what's coming to that area. And so like we try not to do too many of those videos, but like once a quarter, I can bank on like I'm going to do a development video, just kind of doing some updates, and it's going to perform really well because people want to know that stuff, and that's honestly why I started doing development stuff on Instagram was because I had a YouTube video that I did that popped off and it was on developments. And I was like, huh, what if we do some more like short form content for these like developments? And, that was what unlocked everything to our growth.
Nice. That's awesome. And like that just dives into like you saw some of the negative stuff perform well, so you just layered in there the development stuff you saw perform well. You started to layer it, and you started to create like this strategy that you found that works for you on YouTube. So
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, it is I think for me, it's like, it's a continuing evolution, right? Like, the content that we're doing today on my channel is different than what we were doing 3 months ago, even. So, but not too different because it's like at the end of the day, like you have to kind of stick in that niche. But it's like, it's just asking the questions like, how can we make this better? Like we recently went through and unlisted 15 videos that have just died on my channel, and we're in the process of remaking some of those. Like, how can we make them better? Because I think again, obsessing over like analytics and stuff like that, I've come across like these videos that have kind of died on your channel can hold you back, right? And it's hard. It's honestly hard to unlist those videos because it's like so much time and effort went into making them that it's like, to like just take it off my channel. It kind of kills me, but we just had the biggest spike in views that I've ever had in the lifetime of my channel. Um, you know, and that's part of it, right? It's like, as hard as that was, kind of getting that noise off of my channel and then focusing on making better content is paying off again in a really big way.
so really quick on that, like why unlist it? Why not just leave it, recreate it, and then how do you decide which to unlist?
So we went back and looked at basically any videos that haven't gotten a single view in 48 hours, and then kind of looked at the trend line, and a lot of them were just like they went up a little bit and then they're completely flatlined. Like they're not getting any views, and so they're just taking up space on my channel. And so I think the ones that unlisting them, I have a hard time with like deleting them permanently. So unlisting them is essentially deleting them from your channel, but I could go back and relist them at any moment if I wanted to. And I think the one from those 15 that we unlisted, we kind of looked at the analytics of them as like, what did the average view duration look like? Was this a topic that kind of resonated with some people? And for whatever reason, it just stopped getting views. And then we were like, out of that, decided to remake a few of them. But yeah, I also just like, I don't want to have two videos about the exact same thing living on my channel. I'd rather just remake that video and make the quality that much better, and unlist the old one.
Makes sense. It's so when you kind of look at some of the different pieces that make up like the YouTube and what's kind of like worth your time versus not worth your time, and telling someone who's just getting started, like they might ask like, well, do I have to script the video? Like how much time should I spend scripting the video versus like filming in office, out of office? Like what about thumbnails? How do I generate leads? Like all of these questions that I'm sure that you get, like what do you tell people? Like where do you direct them? Like how do they focus? Like, okay, this is where like you should spend this much time in scripting, or like this is what works for me for scripting, or like don't obsess over lead generation, like don't obsess over thumbnails. I don't know, just curious.
Yeah, I think the ultimate goal is to get business from this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like that's got to be a metric that you pay attention to. For me, I script 100%, 100% script almost everything I do. And the reason I do that is because I realize that like it was going to take me a long time to get really good at just like ad libbing and going off of like an outline. I wanted to sound like I knew what I was talking about, and I didn't want to have like all those ums and pauses and stumble. And the reality is like it takes me a long time to write a script, but it takes me 3 times as long to film the video if I don't have a script. And the my mindset after it is usually like negative, like self talk, right? Like it's like, man, I like screwed that up, like it not going to be good, stuff like that. So for me, just scripting out the video on the front end, while it does take a little bit longer, it provides me, the peace of mind that I know the end product is going to be good. Right. So that's why I like to script everything. But, there are people that are just better at talking than I am, so, and I think, my advice to most people is like, just start shooting content and see if you even enjoy it. Because if you don't enjoy doing it, you need to find a different method of building your business. And the reality is a lot of people think they're going to dive into this and then they just, they don't like the time that goes into it. The amount of like I spend just as much time, if not more, on my content creation than I do on my real estate business. And that just doesn't work for a lot of people. And so, first and foremost, like you got to figure out if you like doing it. And so I would sit down and I would come up with your first 8 video topics, and I would record the first 4. And after those first 4, I would sit down and really like reevaluate because it doesn't get easier. Like where I'm still like it's still a challenge to like get my videos recorded. And I know there are a lot of people that like they batch shoot all their videos and they're way better at planning than I am. But I have a very busy real estate business and I have leverage, but I don't have a lot. I'm still very active in the working with my clients and converting the leads and doing all that stuff, and it gets super overwhelming, if I'm honest. So for me, I just like discovered that this was kind of like a creative outlet that I really enjoy. And so I like doing this more than real estate. And so I'm building a business around how can I stop doing real estate and just do content, right? And that's where building in leverage, and I have 2 agents and a VA and a director of operations, and it's like we're building a thing to where I can eventually just remove myself from that part of the business and hyper fixate and focus on the stuff that I want to be doing, which is kind of more of a rainmaker or content creator role.
Yeah, I want to dive into that in a second, but I agree. It's like you have to find what you like, go all in, and keep doing it. You said something that reminded me of a quote by Alex Hormozi. It's an ounce of pre work is worth a pound of post,
Mm,
where basically the more time you spend prepping, like the script, etc., saves so much on the back end for like filming, editing. So,
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I am always amazed at the people that can just sit down with an outline in front of a video and talk for 10 minutes. It's like, that's just not me, like I kind of, again, I've been in sales for 15 years and I've always needed a script to I didn't always have to like have a script to read off, but I had to have a script that I could practice, and then I would just repeat that script over and over again and whatever sales job that I had. And so I knew that about myself coming into this. And, because of I had this advantage of like being in sales and going through all this training where it's like focus on voice inflection and how you say things and get excited about it. Like I can read a script where and not be like just you're thinking about moving to Kansas City. Well, in this video, I'm going to, it's like I can read a script, but it doesn't sound like I'm reading the script. Right. And I think that's kind of a gift, that you have to determine and figure out if you have, right? Because it is something that you either have or you can hone it, but it takes a lot of practice.
yeah. And just being someone who's like really deep in analytics and tracking and just obsessing over that stuff, have you found like the the best way like people generally reach out to you from YouTube? Like they either email, fill out the form, like the best way for you and how you kind of track stuff?
Yeah, we have I'm moving away from putting my phone number in all the videos, just because like if we are going to get to this place where I'm not really involved in the, converting leads and sales and stuff, like I don't want people texting and calling me. So yeah, but I mean, a lot of our clients have reached out directly via email or my phone. And then we do have a lead magnet that's like a relocation guide that we've gotten some clients through that as well. But majority of people that reach out from YouTube, a lot of them use email. So now we've kind of I have a info at movingtokc.net, and that's in all of our videos. And so that's just where I in my call to action. It's like if you're looking to make a move to buy or sell or invest in Kansas City, shoot us an email at info@movingtokc.net. My team and I would love to assist you. And so just kind of like building that, in at the front end that like, okay, he has a team. It may not be Kyle reaching out to me. Is kind of that prep work of like removing myself on the back end.
Yeah. And I found that too is like the emails generally what most people kind of reach out to you. Um, so
Yeah.
where if people want to kind of see what you're up to, keep up with you, where should they go to follow you?
Yeah, right now it's moving to Kansas City on YouTube, moving to KC on Instagram. Full disclosure, I think I'm getting ready to rebrand my Instagram into something that's less real estate sounding because it has kind of evolved into like this more of a media outlet. And moving to KC is going to remain the real estate brand. And that I think I'll always keep my one YouTube channel as moving to KC. But we've actually launched another channel as well that's just kind of focused on home tours. So yeah, you can find me on if you just search Kyle Talbot on either of those, you'll find me.
Nice. So talking about that and like everything that you're building, like your future, like I don't know if you've seen Ken's like old kind of like Disney media mind map. It's shifted now to like where it is. Basically, for anyone watching, it's kind of like how you think through the media plan, like the organizational structure, like what are the different businesses, like basically what are you kind of building towards. So
Go ahead.
when thinking about like what you're trying to build and kind of like the future of everything, the business, the media, what does that look like for you?
Again, it's kind of like every day it changes. But I'm an entrepreneur, right? Like I think a lot of people that get into real estate are. And so real estate is just one arm of the business for me. I think, I'm buying my first flip. Actually just closed on it this morning. So like the investment side is something that I want to get into. And then I have a contractor background. So I've thought about like launching a, handyman business, because a lot of our clients, half of our clients that come here have some kind of work that they need done to their house right when they move in. So having that business is something that's generating revenue. But the media company itself is like a separate asset now from the real estate business. And I think one of the things Ken's done really well is he has the Orlando Reel, which a lot of us who follow him, we think this is Ken Pozek, but it's its own media company that is not held back with all the rules and regulations that surround real estate, right? Like
Yeah.
when I send out any newsletter or anything for moving to KC, I have to have my brokerage on there. It's got to be half the size at least of my logo. There are all these rules that I have to follow. Whereas like if we decouple those and the media company is its own asset now, we can start, charging people to do advertising in our newsletter and, like all of these different things. So that's kind of the direction I think that we're going with that.
That's awesome. So it's like having a whole separate entity and then you can kind of build that however you want because there's no rules, regulations.
I mean, there are rules. They're
There
just
are,
not. They're
yeah,
not. The real estate related rules where we just are kind of limited in how we can advertise. So, um,
yeah.
So yeah, again, I don't think this is going to be everybody's roadmap, but it just kind of shows you the power of like what this is capable of doing. It can become something much bigger than real estate.
So when you think of on innovating almost like the real estate industry and the typical real estate business, like the contractors side, adding that in, the investing, but then the media, the newsletter, like are those kind of what's in the cards and what's in the books, or is there like anything else that you're like, this is kind of where the puck's moving?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, Gary V, Hormozi, Ken, all these people are like, we're a media company that does real estate. We're a media company that sells wine. I think the highly successful people in this day and age are going to be the ones that kind of build a media company to leverage that to get them business for whatever their core business is, right? Because that's just like the way, like the tables, it's like everything, the playing field is way more level today, whereas like I used to have to pay the media company thousands of dollars to advertise on their website or the news, local news or radio or whatever. I could just build my own now. I can just build my own platform and advertise my business through that channel. And I think the people that really latch on to that are the ones that are going to be like, the highly successful versions of whatever trade or business that they're in.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think media is a huge play. Now, kind of thinking as an entrepreneur or someone in sales, like it's not just a straight line up. Even though it looks like it from the outside sometimes, there's ups and downs in sales and entrepreneurship. And kind of almost like going back to like what I mentioned earlier, like you nearly dropping out. Uh, I did kind of a little bit of research and I saw like you kind of almost had to raise yourself as like a kid a little bit. What has all of this kind of taught you, or can you talk to like a moment in time that maybe what kind of changed the trajectory of your life or your business, like as a person or a business owner?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I had a really tough childhood, and so that's kind of part of what you mentioned there. I did almost drop out, but like I had no desire to go to college. I was just like, I need to start making money, and so I've always had like that work ethic to like outwork everybody, right? Like no matter what it was that I was doing, whether it's construction work, manual labor, or sales, like every time that I do something, I set out to be the best at it. And part of that is just comes from my wounding and like having this chip on my shoulder of like like when I was growing up, people would always be like, I'm so proud of you, like you had this really hard upbringing and like you're doing really good. And I just kind of like hated that. It's like I don't want your pity, right? Like again, going back to like this is all a level playing field. Like let me just go out there and prove myself. And that's kind of the mindset that I have in a lot of the things that I do, and I think that's really helped to propel me forward in this business.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like one, it seems like a lot of successful people have this chip on their shoulder that kind of comes from somewhere or stems from somewhere. And then two, something that I was kind of told younger that kind of helped shaped me was like, uh, I'm going to butcher this, but it's like basically like the worst thing for someone to say is like you have so much potential, where it's like, well, that means I'm not quite there. And it's like, and so is, do you think that was kind of like a big, like, how did that kind of shape like the way you think, the way you act, and like just you as a person now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been a blessing and a curse. I mean, on one hand, it's like it created this like hyper individuality and like driven mindset, right? But On the flip side, it's like I have, like some things that I really struggle with in like relationships and empathy and like all of these things, right? So, that I'm working on in counseling. But I think for me, where I'm at this stage in life, we're getting ready to have our fourth boy, and I'm just like, I want to be the best version of myself in everything that I do. I want to show up and be the best dad that I can be, the best husband that I can be, the best business owner and leader and real estate agent and content creator and all of these things. I just want to be the best version of that person, and be present in all those moments.